We all start on the outside looking in. This is where grace begins. We were hungry, we were thirsty, with nothing left to give. Oh, the shape that we were in. And just when all hope seemed lost, love opened the door for us. He said, come to the table. Come join the sinners who have been redeemed. Take your place beside the Savior. Sit down and be set free. Come to the table. Liars and these thieves, there's no one unwelcome here. And that sin and shame that you brought with you, you can leave it at the door and let mercy draw you near. So come to the table. Come join the sinners who have been redeemed. Take your place beside the Savior. Sit down and be set free. Come to the table. Come to the table. To the thief and to the doubter, to the hero and the coward, to the prisoner and the soldier, to the young and to the older, all who hunger, all who thirst, all the last and all the first, all the paupers and the princes, all who failed, you've been forgiven, all who dream and all who suffer, all who loved and lost another, all the chained and all the free, all who follow, all who lead, anyone who's been let down, all the lost you have been found, all who've been labeled right or wrong, to everyone who hears this song. Come to the table. Come join the sinners, you have been redeemed. Take your place beside the Savior. Sit down and be set free. Whoa, sit down and be set free. Come to the table. Come to the table. Sit down and be set free. Come to the table.
When I was young, you called my name. I tried to run, but still you came. And you stepped into the dark, 'cause that's just the kind of God you are. When heaven seems beyond my reach, you still see eternity in me. You're turning ashes into art, 'cause that's just the kind of God you are. It's in the empty tomb, It's on the rugged cross. Your death-defying love is written in your scars. You'll never quit on me. You'll always hold my heart, 'cause that's the kind of God you are.
You gave me freedom from my sin. You told me I could start again.
All the hurt is dead and gone. Now we're your daughters and your sons. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. We once were lost, but now we're found. Forever you hold us in your arms, 'cause that's just the kind of God you are. Oh,
It's in the empty tomb. It's on the rugged cross. Your death-defying love is written in your scars. You'll never quit on me. You'll always hold my heart, 'cause that's the kind of God you are. You are holy, holy, holy. High and set apart. You are holy, holy, holy. God, that's who you are. You are holy, holy, holy. High and set apart. Holy, holy, holy. God, that's who you are. It's in the empty tomb. It's on the rugged cross. Your death-defying love is written in your scars. You'll never quit on me. You'll always hold my heart, 'cause that's the kind of God you are. It's in the empty tomb. It's on the rugged cross. Your death-defying love is written in your scars. You'll never quit on me. You'll always hold my.
Yeah. Yeah. Good morning. Yeah. Well, I want to say good morning to you this morning. And for those of you who are home this morning, we want to welcome you as well, and or other places that are streaming. We're so glad you're tuned in. So this is the first of a series of special presentations that we're going to have here in our church, especially during the holiday season this year and this time period. But with Answers in Genesis discussion groups having been wrapped up now for, well, since the 10th, this is the first Sunday that we have available to do this, and we want to do it here in the sanctuary so that people can actually watch it at home, and there's a stream available to everybody. But it's been my dream for quite a while now to have in-house people here at our church that can make these just razor-sharp presentations that are able to get right at the issues and to really help us in understanding an aspect of living out a biblical worldview in a practical area of our life. So you see on the screen here that a biblical worldview is all about answering the deep questions of life: where we came from, creation, what went wrong, rebellion, what God's doing to fix it, that's redemption, and then how it all resolves eventually, all the hurt and the brokenness of the world, how it eventually gets resolved. So every worldview has to answer those four questions, okay? And then so how we answer those questions gets our assumptions that and the answers behind those questions get lived out in the everyday. And the public school corporations are areas where you see everything represented, all the different viewpoints represented, all the different worldview perspectives represented. So based on our origins, where we come from, what went wrong, what God's doing to fix it, or what we should be doing to fix it, and how it all resolves. So everybody's dealing with that. The students are dealing with it. The teachers are dealing with it. The people that work there, administrators and others are dealing with it. Okay? So it's a very prominent thing. And so what we want to do is we want to live out a biblical worldview in a beautiful, clear, and attractive and inviting manner. And to help us do that, will you make welcome Amy Brown?
Pastor Joey said something about razor sharp presentation, and I realized when I got here this morning, I had sent the first draft of my presentation in the wrong presentation, so the presentation might not be very razor sharp that you see up here. Sorry. Anyway, when Pastor Joey first asked me about this, it took, I think, at least a day for me to respond, because I was trying to figure out what I would say to something like this. I've taught for quite a while and been in a lot of I've been in 3 different school corporations. I've been in a lot of different positions. I've been at all 3 levels, like elementary, middle school, high school. I'm currently at a middle school. And I am not perfect. I've had days I've left my job and thought, I can't go back there tomorrow. So it's been harder. I've done things and thought, wow, I can't believe I said that today. And it's like, how am I supposed to go back tomorrow and I'm a Christian and live out what God wants me to do? So it took me a little bit to figure out if I was even supposed to do this. And then it took me a little bit to say yes and figure out, what does God want me to say? It took me a while to know what I am in God's kingdom. I'm a sower. So if you look at the parable of the sower, I sow seeds. I sow seeds that go on every type of soil. I sow the seeds on the footpath. I sow the seeds on the shallow soil, in the thorns, in the fertile soil. But that's God's purpose for me, is I sow seeds, and sometimes I'm fortunate enough I get to water seeds too. So go ahead and go to slide 2. So that's what really hit me the more I started thinking about this, is for me, living a biblical worldview at school is how I view other people. So, and I feel like, me saying this is really hard because I see people in this room I've taught with, and you see me do really stupid things, and not always treat people the way I should. So it's been a journey for me to get here a little bit. One thing that happened was there was an instance with a student, and it kind of changed everything for me as a Christian on how I do everything and how I approach everyone as a person at school. And it came down to this, is how do I view other people? So go ahead to the next slide. I feel like I'm in good company because a lot of people in the Bible, when you think about it, didn't view people correctly. Okay, so in Job 4, 8, and 11, you see that Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, viewed Job as an unrepentant, proud sinner who was getting everything he deserved. So that's how they viewed him. If you look in 1 Samuel 17, you'll see Saul and the Israelite army looked at Goliath, and they saw an undefeatable champion because they were terrified and they were deeply shaken. In 1 Samuel 16, Samuel looked at Eliab, who was Jesse's firstborn son, and he saw Israel's next king, and God was like, nope, it's not right. Jonah looked at the Ninevites, and he saw them by their cruelty and their sinful actions, not by anybody. He didn't see them as people who deserved mercy or salvation. So, and the people of Nazareth in Matthew 13 saw Jesus as just a carpenter's son. So we tend to not view people the way that we should view people. And I feel like I'm in pretty good company when you have some prophets there, even the disciples. In John chapter 9, saw a man born blind and thought that automatically that it was because he had sinned or his parents had sinned. So we don't always judge people correctly and appropriately, and I found out that I had a problem with this. There was a certain student in my class at school that got on my every last nerve, and this student had been kicked out of my class, and I was not unhappy about that. I'm gonna admit, it was a nice day to have a break from this student, but they were coming back the next day, and I knew that when they were coming back, that my attitude needed to not be what it was at that moment. Because at that moment, I would have been happy if that student would have never came back to my room. But that's not how God wanted me to be. So I prayed a prayer, and it started changing everything for me at school on how I do everything. And the prayer that I prayed was, I wanted God to show me the student like he viewed the student. So in our fallenness, you can go ahead to the next slide. In our fallenness, we don't see people right. So, one more, and then back to this one. Sorry, I got them. Like I said, this was the draft, a little bit out of order. So I'm an 80s kid. So this was one of my favorite movies in the 80s, was The Breakfast Club. And the quote at the end really sticks with me. It says, "You see us as you want to see us in the simplest terms and most convenient definitions." And how I see that show up at school all the time is labels. We label people all the time, everywhere. Everyone does. In psychology, I have a psychology master's. They will tell you that labeling people can be very harmful, and labels that people put on themselves can be very harmful to them and detrimental. They even have a whole theory, attribution theory, in educational psychology about, why are you seeing, what are you attributing a student's actions for? Like, if they don't do work, are you assuming they're lazy or they're irresponsible? So we tend to all see people in simplest terms. We tend to label people. And when I prayed that, I realized how much I labeled people, and it started changing everything. So now back to the Matthew slide. And this also has a mistake on it because, as I said, I'm not perfect. So it should be Matthew 9:36. If you go to Matthew 9:3, it's not going to say that. But it should be in Matthew 9:36. And it says, when Jesus saw the crowds, he had gone across the lake. They had gone to take a break and get away from people. Okay. Because they were tired and they had done a lot of work and they needed some rest, Jesus and his disciples. And when they got off the boat, the people had actually run ahead around the lake, and they were there on the other side. So, and when Jesus saw them, it said that he looked over the crowds, and I like the Message version of this. It said he looked over the crowds and his heart broke. So confused and aimless they were, like sheep without a shepherd. He saw them being harassed. They were being repeatedly attacked by Satan, and there was nothing they could do about it because they were helpless. They can't defend themselves. So that's what he saw when he looked out at people. He saw people like in John 36, when it said, the people who do not believe in the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God abides in them. And what I started to see after I said this prayer was I saw student after student. I saw people I worked with, and I saw people who were lost, who were harassed, who were helpless, that had the wrath of God abiding on them. I told my husband after about the third day of school this year, there's a certain student that walks in my building, and I said, it breaks my heart because you just see the weight. You see what they carry. And some of the things they carry and they tell you about are unreal. Like, I can't imagine as an adult trying to figure out how to deal with this. I have adults in my building that are dealing with things that are heavy, and you see the weight on them. That's how God sees people, and that's how God wanted me to see people. And once that happened, it started changing everything at school for me. So, when was the last time you looked at somebody and had compassion? When was the last time you were at school and you saw that student that bullies everybody and you felt pity for them and that you wanted to help do something to make their life better? Or that teacher that you're like, why are they even here? They don't put anything into it. It's like, we've worked at schools, we've all seen teachers struggle, fellow teachers struggle. And it's like, they're not putting anything into it. This teacher isn't, why are they even here? When was the last time you looked and you were sympathetic and you realized that they had distress and you wanted to do something to help? Or when was the last time you looked at somebody and saw their situation and it broke your heart? As a result of that prayer, I realized that I was labeling people. I would label students and different people in different ways. Stuck in their ways, stubborn. I would label people like that. I would label students as lazy. I would label people as, oh, that's the bad kid. That's the druggy kid. Sometimes we label people otherwise. That's the athlete. That's the princess. That's the bougie girl, right? So we label people all kinds of ways, and I fall to that. That person is the selfish person. So all kinds of labels, but that's not how God sees people. He just sees people who are lost, that need him. So my actions started to change because God showed me things about this student and opened my eyes, and I had no idea before that. I had just seen a student who was a thorn in my flesh. But God showed me somebody that needed him. He showed me that this was a student that had potential, that he created, that could do great things in his kingdom for him if they would just hear about him. So treating people fairly, go ahead. I have slide 6, but it might not. There we go. James 2:1. It point blank says in James 2:1, not to show favoritism is pretty blunt. So that's what James says. Treating people fairly and not showing favoritism is something that changed a lot for me because try as I might, when you have a student and you label them as the bad kid, I had favorites, and that's not how God wanted me to be. So that meant apologizing to everybody when I'm wrong. That was one of the first things. I started, if I did something wrong in my class and I came in and I had a bad day, I would go to my whole class the next day and go, I was a real grouch yesterday. I'm really sorry. So even when they acted up and weren't going to apologize to me for it, I had to apologize to them. I had an administrator I had to apologize for, and I had looked at something, and I thought, this person is wrong, and then I went and looked more closely and found out I was the one that was wrong. The interesting thing is my administrator had done the same thing to me a couple weeks before, and I struggled. It's like, God, why do I have to apologize to them? They didn't apologize to me. They did the same thing. But that's not what this says. I can't pick and choose who I apologize to. I can't pick and choose when I do. So I apologize when I'm wrong, and I admit my faults to my students. Another thing is trying not to play favorites in class would be, I'm going to be honest here, every school I've worked at, there's at one point in time been an athlete who's been doing bad in class and had bad grades, and I've had somebody come and ask me, hey, is there something we can do to get this kid's grade up before this so they can play on Friday? If we're going to treat people fairly, if I'm not going to do that and nobody is going to come up and say that to me about the kid who's been kicked out of class 2 days this week and is failing half of their classes, then I can't make special exceptions for that either. Part of the time I think, even with students, we think our position offers us, well, we're a valuable member of the team, so the teacher will just let this slide. That's not how we're supposed to be. That's not how Christians should be. That's not what parents should do. Don't go ask them. Don't, and as a teacher, don't do that. Treat everybody the same, even if it's not popular. So I actually gave my superintendent's kid after-school detention one day because they were doing something they weren't supposed to do. And a couple minutes after I entered it in my Skyward, it's like my assistant principal came running down. Do you know whose kid that is? I'm like, yeah, I just called and talked to his dad on the phone and told him his kid has detention. So you don't treat people fairly. God's not a respecter of persons or class. We're all sinners. We all need saved. So you have to treat everybody the same. And that's one of the first things I realized that I fell short on and I had to change. Next slide. So Matthew 5:43-47, everybody's heard that. It's love your enemies and pray for those who curse you, or love your neighbor as yourself. And then pray for everyone, basically. Pray for your enemies. In Leviticus 19, God had said to love your neighbor, but Jewish leaders had thought that their neighbors were only Jewish people, so it was okay to hate non-Jews. So in that verse, Jesus says that you've heard it say, love your enemies, or love your neighbor, but hate your enemies. But that's not what God tells us to do. We're not supposed to do that with anyone. So recently we had a student at our school that had a friend since kindergarten, and her friend found out that her parents had voted Democrat, and she came to school and told her, you don't love Jesus, you're going to hell, so I can't be your friend anymore. It's like, that's not loving who you consider your enemy. That's not how we should treat people. That's not what God says. So another time I saw a student who was isolated at school, and it was their own actions. They had made a choice and put something out on social media they shouldn't have, and they kind of became the school outcast. And I showed them love. I tried things, but they were still sitting in class every day all by themselves. Nobody would talk to them. Nobody said anything. We had a project coming up in my class, and it was a partner project, and I had prayed and prayed that someone would reach out to this student. And the day that the project started, the pastor's son from a local church went and sat next to the student, and it changed everything. So they worked together. The student got shown love, compassion, forgiveness, grace. The student transferred to another school, and a couple years ago reached out, and I got a chance to go have coffee with a student for a couple hours. And it was insightful. The change was really awesome. So not the same person that I knew when I taught them in middle school, but also, what was really awesome was some of the things they said, and that was something that the student had said, was that I thought all the teachers in the school hated me, but they felt safe in my class. And they thought everyone hated them, but then other people in my class actually showed that maybe they didn't. That our actions make a difference. So actually showing people love who don't deserve love, who maybe do the wrong thing, and people who aren't for Christ are our enemies, but the world is full of them. So how are you going to show them that you love them? Is there someone that you have trouble praying for? So I found this week, I wrote this down, and then God had instantly brought somebody to mind that I've been working with at school. So in my job, I get to help train teachers, and I have somebody that's a little bit passive-aggressive sometimes right now, and was frustrating me, and I had found that I hadn't prayed for them. So I started praying for them, and lo and behold, Friday I saw them, and they were walking down the hall with me, or toward me, with a big smile, which was the first time they smiled at me in about a month. And I actually had the audacity to be surprised about this. So praying for those who are against us makes a big difference. So last thing I found is that when I started treating people fairly, when I started loving people, when I started praying for them and seeing people from God's viewpoint, then go ahead, next slide. I found out that you have chances to speak the truth to people. And you have all kinds of chances to speak the truth to people. Some of the things that I've had chances to do is kids have told me they're a mistake. And you can tell them, God created you for a reason. I believe that. And you can say that in public school. And so far, some people would say maybe you're lucky, maybe you're fortunate by it. It's just God. So haven't had any problems with that. So you have people or students that tell you, I have a student that told me, we were camping this last weekend, and mom found whoever's text or whatever on dad's phone. Dad left. He's in Texas. I don't know what's going on with my family. And you can ask him, is it okay if I pray for you? Students that have said, all my other teachers has given up on me by this time of year. Why don't you give up? You can tell them, because God doesn't give up on me, so I'm not going to give up on you. You have chances to speak truth, and you don't even have to have someone tell you that you're speaking truth with love. Nobody has to tell me to speak it with love, because I already love them. And it changes everything. It changes everything. I would love to be the person who stands up here and says, I go to school and I preach sermons. I'm not. That's not what God's called me to do. I'm not the person that goes on the street corner and tells everybody, repent, you're going to hell. I'm not. There are times that I felt like maybe I was doing something wrong because I wasn't, but that's not what God's called me to do. And then I always have to remember that people can't understand the truths when they're apart from God's Spirit, because it all sounds foolish to them. That's 1 Corinthians 2. But they do understand love. They do understand kindness. They understand that it's different, because that's not what the world shows. The world, I'm in middle school, the best thing that ever happened is not having phones this year. I can tell you, because in middle school, if somebody does something stupid, the first thing they all want to do is pull out their phone and then post it to make fun of them and share it with everybody else. So you're not supposed to make a mistake in middle school. Everybody finds out about it, and everybody makes fun of you about it, and nobody shows any grace or mercy. And that's the way it is. But that's not how we're supposed to be. If you could go ahead and play the video. If you go to Titus chapter 3, verses 4, or starting at verse 3 and 4, it says, "Once we too were foolish and disobedient. We were misled by others and became slaves to many wicked desires and evil pleasures. Our lives were full of evil and envy. We hated others, and they hated us. He said, if you want to see people hate others and have them hate you, go to a middle school. They're really good at that some days, unfortunately. But that was me. That was me at one point in my life. I was all of those things. I struggled with all of those things. I carried around all kinds of labels, too. It's like, but if you keep reading, it says, but then God our Savior showed us his kindness and his love. I don't know how many people showed me kindness and love before I finally became a Christian in my 20s. There were a lot of Christians that tried that I ignored. They sowed the seed and it went on the path, and it looked like it was doing absolutely nothing to them. And I really hope some of them are in heaven now, and I really hope they can see what God did with those seeds they planted. Because that's why I'm here today. And that's part of the reason I do what I do. Because God shows his love and his kindness through us. He shows his love and his kindness through us to others so that they can be pointed to Jesus and the cross. He uses us to show the love and the kindness. In his infinite wisdom, he uses sinners to tell other sinners about him. So I would say having a biblical worldview at school, to me, this is what it comes down to. Because people showed kindness and love to me, I became a Christian, I became a believer, and I'm saved. I'm adopted. I'm a child of God. And I don't deserve it. Not a bit. But if even one student that comes into contact with me feels that love and kindness with God, and someday they're sitting in a church somewhere, standing up saying, hey, this is how we should treat people, or this makes a difference in the world, this worldview that people can be saved, that the love of kindness of God can do something that's totally against every other worldview out there that says you're stuck in your path, you're destined by your genetics, you're doomed by the family you come from. If you can sit there and we can turn that around, it's amazing what God will do if you believe in that. And that's all I've got.
Let's give her a hand. Yeah. Stay right there, Amy. You did a great job. And, you know, I love when a speaker can really zero in on the point of application so well. And really, her point of application is that God gives us a new identity. And if we can help facilitate the transformation from all the old identities and labels that people have to an identity, they're made by God. Yeah, there's broken stuff in our world, and we see that all around us in the school or wherever, okay? But there is a plan, and part of God's plan is recognizing who he's made me to be, and that is I'm a loved child of God, and that's where it starts. Okay, so God made you. The devil didn't make you. God did. So you belong to him. Now let's talk about that, all right? I love this. I love this presentation. So maybe you have practical questions that you would like to ask or propose, and if so, I'm going to come to you. You can just kind of talk into my wireless mic. Amy, you hang on to your mic, and then maybe Amy can respond or react to that, or if there's another educator in the room that'd like to react or respond, then I'll come to you, okay? So any questions or comments or just observations that you have to share with us this morning? Anybody? Just put your hand up and I'll come to you. So I love and appreciate our teachers and our staff. You guys do a great work, and we love you and appreciate you. And you're going to find all the different perspectives and things in a school, especially a public school. And so you'll find a different perspective in science class. You'll find a different style in the student body. you'll encounter bullying. You'll see people hurting so much at home, and you know a little bit about their home setting. And when they come to school, probably the greatest new labeling that happens is at their school, where somebody treats them with dignity and love. Anybody just care to speak to some of that, or have a question related to that? Yes, I'll come to you. Boom. Yep, just kind of talk into the, yeah. Talk loud.
How close am I supposed to get?
Just, yeah.
Okay, this is good. I was just wondering, like, obviously, like, you have to do some discipline in your classroom. And so, how can you do that in, like, a loving manner, but also in the moment? Like, for me as a teacher, like, I get an actual, like, physical reaction in my body when I'm angry at a student because they're doing something that's wrong. And you know, making things hard for other students as well. So, like, how can you, I mean, not, I guess, like, label them in the moment or make them feel labeled because, no, well, now I have a detention. I'm a detention kid. Like, how can you speak into that but still also offer discipline?
I think there's been times I've sent students out in the hall because I knew if I didn't, that I would lose it. I'm just going to be honest. So sometimes taking a break for a minute and giving yourself a couple minutes to like process and calm things down is helpful. And when I do that, I always pray for the student and pray for myself that I'll do the right thing and say the right things. So taking a step back a little bit and instead of just instantly doing something is helpful for me. Then also talking through it with the student. I mean, and just asking, it's like, do you know why you're in trouble? I mean, and then explaining things through. I mean, I've had to explain to kids before, I understand that at your house, this is how everybody talks all the time, but we can't say this here. So we need to find a way to fix it. You know, it's like, you're in trouble for this, but can you help me come up with a plan so that we can fix this so that this isn't your go-to language all the time in class? Or you may not understand this, but when you come across this way, you're being really respectful to adults and it's gonna get you into a lot of trouble. So here's some things that we could try to help that out. And they still get in trouble, but they know that you care, and I feel like they see that it's not just out of anger or frustration. I don't know if that helps or not, but.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. Good question. Anybody else? Questions or comments? Yes, okay. Yep. Gotta speak into the mic.
So, I just started working as a janitor at the high school, and one thing I was wondering is with students that might go into our restrooms and whatnot. I don't need to go into great detail, but how should I respond to some of the teachers about them, because sometimes the students are repeat offenders and all that stuff, so it's kind of that way I'm also learning how to go forward with this, because it's my first year being in the school system, so like, how should I apply that and possibly actually help them out?
That's a good question. I think if you notice something about a student and you know that they're doing something they shouldn't be doing repeatedly in the bathroom and you caught them, I mean, letting teachers, but also letting administrators know about that is really helpful. I was gonna say, any position I've ever been in at school, I guess if I see a student doing something I know they're not supposed to, I usually always will say, hey, that's not how we should do things. I mean, so I wouldn't be afraid to correct a student if they're doing something that they're not supposed to do. But yeah, if it's somebody that's repeating things, I would reach out to my administrator and let them know.
Yeah. Anybody else? So we really, really appreciate the investment you're making in young lives, and it does make a difference. Sometimes you feel like maybe you have a gut check. Why am I doing this again? You know, we all have that in our careers and things, in our callings. But then there's that one student that steps in one day, and you don't expect it. And they maybe sit down and they offer back to you feedback of appreciation, and just like, and when you thought you were questioning the whole idea of this vocation and direction and all that, that one student lets you know, man, this is worth it. Anybody want to speak to that this morning? Anybody would want to speak to that point? Yeah, that's a very precious thing, and I know it's happened in some of your lives. Amy, you have a lot of conversations with students, don't you? I mean, they come in with all types of different needs and come from different family contexts and things, and I'm sure that's happened in your world probably more than once, for sure. But especially in the middle school level and all the identity issues that are happening, my goodness. And just to have a stable presence in their life, someone that they can connect to, is huge. Okay, so any other questions or comments this morning before we wrap it up? Yes. And the reason I'm trying to get everybody on the mic is because the streamers can hear the questions a little easier that way.
My wife is cringing already, but if you would, we've had so many conversations, and when Joey said that, would you just share one or two of the kids that have come to you, you know, and you shared with the young lady that you had coffee with, but share a couple more examples of just kids responding to what you talked about this morning and coming back and saying thanks, or you helped in this situation. So just an example or two, I'd appreciate it.
One of them that comes up that's big. There was a student that I have. Part of my job is I get to pull small groups of students too. And when you work with them in middle school, then you see them for 3 years. So the relationship you get to build with them is, I mean, you kind of turn into mom. I mean, that would be one I was thinking of. In my completed slides, I have this picture, and it hangs up on my wall all the time so I can remember to pray for this student. But it says, "Happy Mother's Day to the best school mom ever," and it has a gum wrapper heart on it. And the student came in, when I met this student, it was, the teachers around this particular student to begin with called them the Hot Mess Express. We have a few like that. I mean, everything was, anyway, you name it. Any bad behavior you could come up with, they had. I mean, never turned in homework. It's like caused all kinds of problems in school and in classes. And by the end of the student's 8th grade year, that's when they gave me that note. And turned in work all the time. I mean, had friends that were healthy friendships. Not a Christian yet. That's why that note still hangs on my cabinet, because I pray every day when I see that. Because that's what I want for this student, because you saw enough change in that. Another student I can think of actually had to leave school because they were suicidal in their 6th grade year. In their 8th grade year, this particular student brought me up a flyer from an insert in their bulletin, and it was at church. And it was, get to know one of our church members, because this student had become a Christian and was serving in the nursery at church. So, and that's just God. I mean, there's never anybody that's beyond his reach or has run far enough that he can't get. So, yeah, some of those, they keep you going. They're encouraging to me, and they keep you praying for those students that leave that you might not have seen as much of a change. I just have to believe that you plant the seed. That's what God says the sower does. He says the sower threw the seed. It doesn't say that you pick and choose the soil. You just throw the seed and let God work on it.
Beautiful. So, any other questions or comments? Yes. Okay, Harlan.
Coming from a substitute teacher's standpoint, Amy, it was always a pleasure to sub for you when you were at one particular middle school. You always had things good and organized. But this past week, I took the week off from Geldwin and did some substitute teaching for 2 different schools. How do you react to situations? I came across this past week about almost every day where a student does something to another student, but the student that got hurt begs you not to. Do you feel always a pressure, but you wind up doing the right thing? How does that make you feel?
If somebody does something wrong in my room, you're going to be in trouble. So, I mean, that was me. It's like there's going to be consequences for what you did. And those consequences come from me. They have nothing to do with another student. So, but then I know that there are students sometimes that get picked on, or students that are intimidating to other students. And just to let those kids know that you're safe, and it's safe, and that if you're letting this other student get in trouble, it's to keep them safe. It's not to cause them more problems. And I think it's a little bit different when you're a substitute, because you're unknown. When you teach all the time, kids know that, and they get to know that about you, and they know what your expectations are in class. So, but just doing the best you can with that student and letting them know it's like this person is probably going to get in trouble because they did wrong, but it's not on you.
Just a comment about teachers and how much they affect people for the rest of their lives. So I just want to appreciate all the teachers that I even see and hear. Just a little story. When I was a senior, you're always the question is to every senior is, what are you going to do after high school? And that was really bothering me. I didn't know for sure what I was going to do. And there was a teacher there, Hal Prickett. Some of you will know him. Wasn't a Christian, but he asked me that question, and I mumbled around, and I said, just a farmer. And he looked at me, and he said, just? And I'm telling you, that stuck with me my whole life and my whole career. So now, if you ask me what I am, I'm going to say proudly, I'm a farmer. Yes. And that goes back to all those years ago, a teacher influenced me in that area. So again, I just want to thank the teachers that make impacts on kids' lives for the rest of their lives, not only during high school, but for their whole career. So thank you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. One of my prayers, and by the way, if I have a student and that student is in an Amy Brown's classroom, I'm rejoicing, because Amy Brown is going to bring what needs to be brought every day, day in and day out. So teachers are doing an incredible work, casting vision for lives and helping people see, hey, wait a second. No, that's a noble calling, or this is who you're made to be, and let's elevate our game a little bit, and let's shoot higher here, and let's think in clearer terms about things. And so you guys do such a good job of that. One of my prayers when I came to Stones Hill was, God, give us the stability here so I can raise all my kids in the same community for all 4 years of high school. And God has answered that prayer. In fact, they love coming home and love coming to church because of you and the teachers that they got to have and the church family they got to be with. And that just has continued. So God, All three kids went to 4 years of high school here at West Noble and graduated. Well, when Megan was she came as a freshman year she came, and so she got to know the teachers and everything. And there was a teacher over here by the name of Mr. Pearson. Who remembers Mr. Pearson? Okay? And the subject matter that he taught and things. And so for whatever reason, Mr. Pearson touched Megan's heart. And I don't really know what his worldview was totally on everything, but he touched her heart. And they had this little joke. I mean, Megan tried track. She was more an artist, not a track person. She tried track. And then Mr. Pearson would tease her, well, I'm going to bring my calendar and time you. Okay, just flip the months when you're running. Okay, it's going to take you a while. They had that little thing going back and forth. Okay, he would joke, she would joke. And then by the end of her high school, and I think Mr. Pearson has kind of graduated from, or transitioned out of teaching now, but she sat down and wrote him a letter. And I didn't know this until later, but he kept that letter, and he framed it and he put it on his fireplace. That's how much it meant to him. So you teachers, be encouraged. You're making a difference. And you students, never underestimate the power of gratitude and a letter or a word of encouragement. Just like Amy said, because teachers are human beings too. And they have rough days and seasons of life, and they're struggling through some of the rebellion issues of the world in their family, in their life, in their world, okay? They're people too. And those letters can be life-changing. Let's pray together. Father, thank you so much for this day, and thank you so much for Amy and just really helping us to approach this subject and topic in a way that really lifts you up and that focuses in on the value of people. And I pray today that we would be able to look beyond the labels and somehow be a part of your process of helping people drop labels and apply a newer, better label, a truer label. And not even, let's just get totally out of the label game altogether, that we are made in your image. We belong to you, and we have inestimable worth and value. Thank you for every teacher, every administrator and assistant, custodial person and transportation person that conveys that and communicates that. Coaches, all the people that convey that on a daily basis. Thank you. And then I just pray for every student as they mix it up and they're figuring out life and they're figuring out questions and they're looking at these worldview questions and they're trying to sort through some of that, make sense of that. Just pray, God, that you would give them wisdom and discernment, and that what we have in all of our school corporations, you just bless and guide the leadership and the direction of those corporations in such a way that students could thrive and all of our students could really grow and learn and be given the foundation to go and fulfill their life callings. God, we want to be intentional as a church, to be able to have people look back on our church and say, man, they were so intentional about preparing me for life. My home church was so intentional, and they really gave thought to the process of how they could prepare me. And for this, I am grateful. Lord, that is our prayer. We ask it all in your name. Amen. Hey, let's give Amy a hand. Yes. Awesome. So you're dismissed. Take a break, and we'll see you back here about 10.